Being alone is often seen in a very specific way, as something negative, as something people end up in when things don't work out, when they don't have enough people around them, or when they somehow fall behind in life. And because of that, most people don't choose to be alone. They experience it, resist it, and try to get out of it as quickly as possible. Not because they understand what it is, but because they've already decided what it means. But being alone and feeling lonely are not the same thing. Loneliness is a reaction. It comes from feeling disconnected, unseen, or dependent on something outside of you that isn't there. Being alone, on the other hand, is a condition. It's the absence of external input. And what most people never realize is that this condition is not empty, it's active. It starts changing how you think, how you respond, and how you understand yourself, but only if you stop trying to escape it. In this video, we're going to look at why being alone is not something to avoid, but something that quietly becomes a catalyst for clarity, for self-awareness, for better decisions, and for understanding what actually matters to you without constant interference. Because the moment you stop treating solitude like a problem, it starts becoming the space where everything begins to make sense. Welcome to the Glitch Cult, where we look beyond what you see and understand what it's doing to you. There's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely, but most people never experience that difference because they don't stay alone long enough to understand it. The moment silence appears, they try to fill it with people, with noise, with distractions. Not because they need it, but because they're not used to meeting themselves without interference. When you choose to be alone intentionally, the first thing that starts to change is not your life, but your awareness of it. You begin to notice how much of your thinking was never really yours. Opinions you repeated, decisions you made, reactions you had, all of them start to feel slightly unfamiliar. Not because they are wrong, but because you never question where they came from. And this is where clarity begins, not as a sudden realization, but as a slow removal of noise. Without constant input from others, your mind stops reacting and starts observing. You see patterns in your own behavior. You understand why certain things drain you and why others feel meaningful. You're no longer just participating in your life, you're examining it. This naturally builds self-awareness, but not in a surface level way where you label yourself with traits. It becomes more functional. You start recognizing your emotional triggers before they control your actions. You understand your limits without needing external validation. And slowly, you stop explaining yourself to people who are never trying to understand you in the first place. At the same time, something else starts to develop: emotional stability. When you're constantly around others, your mood is often influenced by them, their opinions, their behavior, their expectations. But when you are alone, you are forced to sit with your own emotional state without outsourcing it. You can't distract yourself from discomfort. You have to process it. This is where resilience is built, not through extreme situations, but through repeated exposure to your own thoughts without escaping them. You learn how to calm yourself without needing reassurance. You learn how to move forward even when no one is watching. And over time, this creates a kind of internal strength that is not dependent on circumstances. Another shift happens in the way you make decisions. When you are surrounded by constant input, your decisions are often influenced by what is expected, accepted, or convenient for others. But in solitude, that external pressure reduces. You start making choices based on alignment instead of approval. Not because you become selfish, but because you finally understand what actually matters to you. And that understanding changes your priorities. You begin to see the difference between what feels is actually important. You realize how much time was spent maintaining things that never added value to your life. And instead of reacting to everything, you start choosing what deserves your attention. This is also where creative freedom begins. Not in the sense of producing something immediately, but in the space that allows ideas to form without interruption. When your mind is not constantly occupied, it starts connecting thoughts in ways it couldn't before. You begin to think deeper, question more, and explore ideas without the need for immediate validation. And through all of this, one thing becomes clear: being alone is not a lack of connection. It is the beginning of the most direct connection you can have, which is with yourself. Not the version shaped by others, but the one that exists when no one else is influencing it. Most people avoid this because it feels uncomfortable at first, but that discomfort is not loneliness. It is unfamiliarity, and once you move past it, what you find is not emptiness, but clarity. Once you become comfortable being alone, the way you interact with the world does not become distant. It becomes more intentional. You no longer seek constant presence from others just to avoid silence. Instead, you begin to choose connection based on depth, not availability. This changes your relationships first. You stop tolerating interactions that feel forced or one-sided, not out of arrogance, but because you no longer need them to fill a gap. When you're already comfortable with your own company, you don't depend on others to regulate your emotional state. And because of that, the connections you do keep become more genuine. You start appreciating people for who they are, not for the role they play in reducing your loneliness. This removes a lot of hidden pressure from relationships. You're not expecting them to constantly entertain you, validate you, or give you direction. And in return, you show up more present because your attention is not divided between needing something and understanding something. At the same time, your tolerance for distractions decreases. Things that once felt necessary, constant notifications, endless scrolling, unnecessary conversations, start to feel like interruptions rather than engagement. Not because they are bad, but because you have experienced what it feels like to think without interruption. This directly affects how you use your time. You become more selective, not in a rigid or restrictive way, but in a way that reflects awareness. You start noticing how certain activities leave you feeling empty, while others create a sense of progress or stability. And instead of following habits automatically, you begin choosing them consciously. There's also a shift in how you handle uncertainty. When you're always surrounded by others, it is easy to rely on collective thinking to make decisions. But when you're used to being alone, you develop the ability to sit with uncertainty without rushing to resolve it. You can think through situations without needing immediate input, which leads to more stable and consistent decisions. This independence is often misunderstood. It is not about avoiding people or isolating yourself. It is about removing unnecessary dependence. You are still connected, but not attached in a way that limits your thinking or behavior. You're able to step back, assess situations clearly, and act based on understanding rather than pressure. And because of this, your confidence starts to change. It is no longer based on external feedback. It comes from knowing that you can handle your own thoughts, your own emotions, and your own decisions. This kind of confidence is quieter, but more stable. It doesn't require constant reinforcement because it is built on experience, not approval. Another important shift is in how you value your own time. When you are comfortable being alone, time is no longer something you're trying to pass. It becomes something you are aware of. You notice how quickly it moves when you are distracted and how much you can actually do when you're focused. This awareness naturally leads to better use of it without forcing discipline artificially. And finally, Solitude changes how you view connection itself. You stop seeing it as something you always need and start seeing it as something you choose. This makes every meaningful interaction more valuable because it is not coming from a place of need, but from a place of understanding. So being alone does not reduce your connection with the world. It refines it. It removes what is unnecessary and strengthens what is real. And once you experience that, you don't see solitude as something to avoid anymore. You see it as something that allows everything else in your life